Okay.
Yeah, it's recording now. So let me see here.
Hey everybody, we're trying to invite Kay to be a host right now. So we're starting a little early, but Kay registered and didn't join as a host, and we want her to be able to have video on this. So bear with us for a couple of minutes while we get her set up.
All right, Kay, I just promoted you to a panelist. Let's see if you come on there. We see your name. Not your picture yet, though.
And then see if you can start video. There we go.
There we are.
Yeah, there we are.
Hi.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Kay.
Good.
You're,
nice to see you.
Can you see Glenn there too?
I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello.
Okay.
Oh, hi, Glenn. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. So, do we have our participants yet on the meeting?
Yeah, we've got quite a few.
Okay.
We've got about, looks like about 30 some odd already.
Okay.
And it
Maybe
looks like it's still growing a little bit. So
okay.
we are recording. So if you're watching a recording of this, just bear with us for a few minutes. We had a little minor technical difficulty we had to solve.
Okay.
I'd say, Kay, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Great. Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for attending. And it's always great to have my good friend, Jim Goodrich, who is an appraiser, top appraiser in the Collin County area. Just to give you a little briefing of his background, he has over 25 years experience in real estate as a broker, investor, and an appraiser. And he's earned the SRA and the MAI designations, which is the highest level of designation for residential and commercial appraisers. He's also qualified as an expert witness in several courts of law and on appraisal work, mostly in the commercial area. So welcome, Jim. It's always good to have to see you and to have your input. And then Glenn, who happens to be his son, is also a graduate. I have to say this. I almost wore my purple and gold today, Glenn, for LSU, because I know
Good for you. Good for you.
A&M, but I decided that I needed to be friendlier, so I decided not to have the alma mater or anything going in the background.
I'm a fan of what you guys did this past year. So
yes, but anyway, it's so nice to meet you, Glenn. But he is a tax consultant who's developed a software package, PropertyTax.io. And as mentioned, he graduated A&M with a master's in real estate land development in middle of the Great Recession. Okay, everybody remembers a few years ago, and he stated to me is that nobody in his class got a job offer at that time. So he joined Jim, his dad, on the property tax side. And over the past few years, he's really kind of turned the process upside down, and he's used his his experience as a tax consultant to reverse engineer the appraisal district process. And he is the founder of the PropertyTax.io, which is a web application that is revolutionizing the residential property tax process, protest process. So with that, I also want to say thank you to our clients who are joining us today, and to our great realtors in Ebby Halliday Realtors Plano office. And we know that you're going to find value and benefit from this great program. So with that, I will say, Jim and Glenn, you're on, and thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Kay. This is Jim, and we're going to start out with just about a 5-minute introduction here, because we're in such a unique market right now. We've got a lot of people asking questions about what's going on in the real estate market, where have we been, what's going on, what are values going to do. And so this is mostly for the agents, but I think if you're a homeowner, you'll find this very interesting, hopefully. So I'm going to do a little screen share here. And let's see. Give me just a minute here. Glenn, is the PowerPoint showing there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now we got a full screen there now?
Yes.
Okay, what you're looking at now, the agents will be somewhat familiar with this, but this is not an easy chart to find. For those of you that are not agents, when realtors schedule their showings, they go through a centralized agency called Showing Time. And Showing Time pretty much covers the whole United States and all the major markets. And so every time a showing is booked, they record that showing. And so this is just, especially at this time, a wealth of information for some nerdy guy like me to make charts and graphs out of. And so what you're looking at is an index graph, and it starts at 0. This is in January here, and it goes through, this first graph here goes through about April the 13th. And so on an index graph, the first starting point is always 0. And so this is looking at the number of showings the first week in January. So we're going to look at just the blue line here first. Starts out at 0, and then you can see the blue line as it progresses through January and February, gets into March, it's just continually climbing. And it just crescendos all the way through April. And if we had an extension, it would just go out and build up through about July and start tapering off in August. And by the time Christmas comes in December, it's probably back down where it was in the beginning of the year. Every agent knows that cycle. They show their houses and do their closings pretty much in the spring and the summer. So now let's look at the tan line. Started out just fine. It actually was a little bit ahead of last year's showings. Came along here to about March the 9th, 10th, 11th, somewhere around in there. And then it just fell off the cliff. And we all know why. And when we got down to the end of the month, this is March 30th, where my cursor is right there, our showings were off 42% from where they were in the first week of January. That's something no real estate agent wants to hear, no home seller wants to hear, and we all know why. But the interesting thing about the graph is it started turning around the end of the month and started coming back up. So if we advance it a couple of weeks, here's where we were, and look at what's happened. This is May the 4th, and we can see that the blue line kept continuing to climb. This was Easter weekend. That was that dip right there. So if we keep going a little bit, this is about a week ago. We actually caught up with where we were last year, and then both lines took a dip. This is Mother's Day, and we ended up that week with our showings up about 20, maybe 19% from where they were at the beginning of the year. So pretty much the same as last year. So we advanced this forward one more week to get to the current week, and looky, looky, looky here. We've actually passed where we were this time last year. So there's been a lot of predicting about what the lockdown and the COVID and everything was going to do. And I will tell you, I've looked at a few other states, and I have yet to find one that's really any better than Texas. There's some that are kind of close, but we're in a great area, as we all know. And once we got past this shelter in place, people are being very careful about showing houses. We're being very, very careful when we're appraising the houses, but it's pretty much gone back to business as usual. So that's great news. So we're going to look at a couple other things, and then we're going to get into the tax consulting. So those of you in the Plano office, I come over there at least once a year, and we always talk about hotness factor. And that is just really something that this office especially, I know they've got it locked down cold because we've done it several times. But for those of you that are new, haven't seen this before, this is a very simple statistic that we use to gauge the strength of the market. And it's really a ratio. If you look at the pie chart here, it's the ratio of the houses under contract which is the blue part of the pie here, to the total pie. So this happens to be Frisco in the 300 to 399 price range. 38% of the inventory is pending, 62% still available. That's a pretty normal market. That's a balanced market. So I have some notes over here on the left. What is a balanced market? Pretty much 25 to 35%. When it gets below 20%, it's a pretty soft market. When it gets above 40%, it's a pretty strong market. And when you get above 50%, 55% or so, you've got a hot market. And so that varies by price range. And we produce a report every quarter that gives a hotness factor for a lot of different neighborhoods in a lot of different areas. And all the agents over there at Ebby and Plano have that chart, and they use it, I know. So why do we talk about this? I thought we'd take just another minute and look at where was the hotness factor last year and where is it today? Because the hotness factor is the primary indicator of where the market is going in terms of appreciation or depreciation. If you see the hotness factor start to move up and tighten and get higher, then you've got a hot market, and you're going to have upward pressure on pricing. You're going to have multiple offers, and we've all been through that, so we know what that is. And if the hotness factor starts to fall, then you're going to have a soft market. Sellers are going to have to cut their prices, and buyers are going to make deals. So what are we finding? This is a chart that compares hotness factor for different markets. So we're here on the left with this year and last year. The 2019 is on the top and the 2020 is on the bottom. So the first market I selected was Plano in the fours, 400 to 500,000. And last year, that hotness factor at this time of year was about 34%, and now it's about 36%. So it's actually a little bit better than what it was last year. If we go to Plano in the $700,000 price range, you can see the hotness factor went way back. It's below 20%, so it's a pretty soft market. But I can tell you that market has always been soft as long as I've been doing this. And so this is nothing unusual. You can see the two lines are just exactly the same. It's no different today than where it was a year ago. If we go down to McKinney in the 400s, you can actually see that it's a little better market this year than last year. Here's to Frisco. We just looked at that, about 38%. I put a lower price range in here in Allen in the 2 to 299. Look at where it was last year. It was about 66%. That's a white hot market in anybody's book. And now it's down at 59%. So it's a little bit lower, but I'll tell you, the agents can tell you this, when 59% of the inventory is under contract, you're going to have trouble finding your buyer a house, and the buyer is going to have to pay more than list sometimes. So I won't go through all the rest of them, but the takeaway from this is that this market that we're in right now is just as strong as it was last year. There's really no difference except for, here's the market last year on the left. Here it is this year. The pie proportions are the same. The pie is just smaller. There's about 25% fewer listings on the market now, and there's about 25% fewer buyers. We think that's going to change. The agents are out there listing properties, and they're getting showings. And so my prediction is that if we do this a month or so from now, these two circles will be about the same size. So that's just a little bit of background. Some of the things we do over at the Ebby office, and these guys are big on education. And so when you're dealing with them, you know that they've done their homework. So we're going to shift it over to Glenn right now, because I know that's really why you tuned in. And I'm just going to ask you, Glenn, I saw something interesting in the paper today. Some of you may have seen this. A few weeks ago, the Ellis County commissioners all signed a letter to the appraisal district saying, we want you to freeze values at last year. We can't stand values going up this year in this market, and we're just going to take it on the chin and so forth. Well, because they said the market, by the time the taxpayers protest, the market's going to be totally in the tank. If any of you saw the article from Steve Brown this morning in the Dallas Morning News, you saw that Ellis County, the sales in April after COVID were up more than any other area that he surveyed. So Glenn, what is the COVID stuff going to do to the property tax consultants and the people that are protesting their properties? Are they going to be able to use these quote unquote low sales that we're really not seeing out there?
Well, first, can you stop? You need to stop sharing your screen so I can share mine. But an interesting thing also about Ellis was they had originally planned, they even said so, that they originally planned on increasing values by 10%. And so it seems like they were kind of, reacting to things without seeing how it's going to play out. And it also, what people don't need to realize is that the appraisal districts by law have to value a property as of January 1st of every year. And so when you saw the appraisal districts or like county commissioners, a lot of politicians out there saying that we need to roll and freeze values, a lot of chief appraisers, with the exception of Ellis County, started pushing back against that, saying that, well, we're legally bound to value properties on January 1st. And that's not just something that they say to be sticklers. There's recommendations from the state comptroller's office if they fail to value properties at their market value. If they fail what's called a property value study, the comptroller's office can withhold funding to school districts that they oversee. And so there's real penalties if they don't increase values when they think that they should. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Ellis County. This year you might get a pass on this year, given with everything that was going on. I'm not sure. We'll just see how that plays out. But kind of to dial it into what people are currently feeling, like the emotions of the market. What I did on my first graph here is that you're seeing the stock market, the Dow Jones trend from May of last year and this was May of this year. And this green box that's up here on the top left, you see that's the world that the appraisal district is living in. They're collecting evidence to value your property on January 1st during this time period. And so that's a good, healthy market, that we were in. And then you see over here, when the stock market drops and a lot of angst in the economy, that's kind of the world that taxpayers are living in. They're living in the here and now. And so there's a lot of, even though that we're seeing some good stats from our local markets here, I still think there's a lot of angst in the economy because kind of on the other side of what Jim has been saying is that it's a real thing that people have been furloughed, or maybe a spouse has been laid off, or somebody in a household has been asked to reduce their wage so that they can still stay employed. We have our comptroller, Glenn Hager, is out saying that we should expect to go into a recession, and is predicting that we'll have unemployment in Texas in the low double digits. So there is a lot of angst in the market, I'm feeling, and there's a lot of indicators that say that we're definitely not in the healthy economy in Texas that we were in the past couple of years. And so I'm just kind of speaking now to what I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, which is, oh, the appraisal district wasn't considering COVID when they sent my notice value out, because what's happening now is when all this angst in the economy is going on, people are receiving notice of appraised values. And in a lot of cases in our area, the values have increased, or at least they're not decreasing, and they're just worried about taxes in general. Oops, progressed a little bit. So Tarrant was one of the first counties in our area to release values. And I'm just kind of speaking to the North Texas area because you might have clients that are all over. And so this is kind of good nuggets of information to take away. Tarrant had a 0% median change in residential value for 2020, but they had a positive 4% change in the appraised value. A lot of people get confused by that stat. They don't really know what the appraised value is. So the market value is the value that the appraisal district says that your property will sell for on January 1st of that year. The appraised value for properties that have a homestead has you cannot be increased by more than 10% from the previous year's appraised value. And that's just to offer the tax relief to homeowners. 10% is 10%, so it's a lot, but at least it's preventing it from going wild. What we saw in Tarrant last year was they increased values by like 20%. And so what you're seeing this year is you're seeing the appraised values kind of playing catch up with last year's market value that they had set. Why that's important is because your tax bill is actually based off of the appraised value and not the market value. So if you have somebody out there who their value wasn't increased, they need to pay attention to, was their appraised value increased? Maybe they were increased by a lot last year and they weren't increased this year, but their appraised value is going up this year. That means their tax bill is going to go up. And so that's something to pay attention to. Denton County saw a 1% median change in appraised values. And again, they had the 1.5% change in appraised values because they were more aggressive last year. But Denton is kind of more over the board depending on what area you're in. Some areas were hit with positive 5% change in value. So Argyle, Carrollton, and Lake Dallas and Louisville, all those areas saw 5 and maybe 8% changes in appraised value from last year. So if you have clients in that area, or if you live in that area, you got hit harder than what the normal citizen of Denton got hit with. Rockwell County was pretty aggressive. Across the board, they saw a 3.6% median change in value. Okay. And then I just got this in from Collin County because they just released their data to the public. Collin County was relatively flat this year. McKinney has a less than 1% change in value. Frisco pretty much stayed flat. Plano stayed flat. Allen was 0%. Prosper 0%. Fairview actually saw a minor decrease, and Salina saw a slightly under 1% increase in value. On the other side of the equation, an important part of people's tax bills is not just the value that comes from the appraisal district, but the tax rates that are set by the local taxing jurisdictions. And I want to kind of raise awareness about some issues that we might be having this year with tax rates. So we are seeing in some areas values go up and some areas values kind of staying the same, but we're seeing a lot of headlines from taxing jurisdictions that they're worried about their budgets. They are worried about that the good times are over, essentially, that we're going to see declining values in real estate. And keep in mind, they're not just worried about just residential, they're worried about sales tax. You know, is it a new norm that people kind of stay in more until we get a vaccine? They're worried about commercial properties. So if you're if you're a contributor to property tax in your retail, are you going to shut your doors, or are you going to have to, is the value of that real estate going to be less because people aren't going to be out and about? Foot traffic isn't going to be as high. So there's other considerations outside of just residential stats that we're seeing that cities and ISDs are worried about with having incoming revenue for the next year. And this kind of goes back to what Ellis County was talking about earlier when we were talking about Ellis County freezing values. That wasn't just a thing that we were looking at with Ellis County. You were kind of hearing that across the board. And what kind of frustrated me in that whole conversation was that a lot of people that were talking about freezing or rolling values from 2019 are politicians that vote on tax rates. This is just a simple illustration of the power of the tax rate. Let's say that the appraisal district hypothetically increased the value of a property by 5% from last year. Well, if the taxing jurisdictions vote for a tax rate of 0%, guess what that person's tax bill is going to be is $0. So, I mean, that's not realistic. Obviously, we need tax rates, but it shows the power of the tax rate. Taxing jurisdictions aren't bound legally by setting values as of January 1st. Appraisal districts are. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I felt like a lot of politicians were trying to put, I don't know if it was intentionally, but it felt like a bunch of smoke and mirrors in front of people about the responsibilities that they carry with their citizens. They didn't want to talk at all about tax rates. They wanted to shift all the blame onto appraisal districts, and I thought that was kind of copping out on it. And I'm happy to see now that the Governor Abbott is stepping up his language and is using his bully pulpit powers to urge taxing jurisdictions to take more responsibility about the tax rates during this time period. He was kind of stumbling out of the gates a little bit. I'm sure he had a ton of things that he was dealing with. And now he's really kind of struck his stride with, I think, rightfully focusing on the taxing jurisdictions and the tax rates, because that is something that is much, much easier and much less complex in a certain way than it is to require a law change for appraisal districts to freeze values. So I kind of want to just communicate that message to everybody here, that I think that the local taxing jurisdictions, our elected officials, needed a little bit more pressure from us this year than in years past. So that we won't know tax rates until October. There's going to be a period of time where they elicit feedback, and I think that starts in kind of the August and September time period. So I encourage you to be involved in that part of the process. More so than ever, hardly anybody ever gives feedback when it comes to tax rates, and I think this year we especially need to be active in that part of the process. So this year's going to be really important for your property tax, because I do think we're going to have increasing property tax bills, because even if the value did stay the same, I think that taxing jurisdictions will increase tax rates to a certain extent. To that extent, I don't know, and I think that's why we need to get involved to kind of hold them back, because there is a legal battle going on right now that's not an official legal battle, but you can kind of see it bubbling up. That so when Governor Abbott declared a state of disaster in Texas because of COVID, that there's a discussion if that triggered a provision in the tax bill that would allow local taxing jurisdictions to increase their tax rates at a higher rate without seeking voter approval. So right now, in a new law that was just passed, taxing jurisdictions can only, if you're a city, you can only increase your tax rate by 3.5% year over year. It used to be 8%, and now it's only 3.5%. If you're a school district, it's 2.5%. But however, there's provisions in there that were really meant for situations like Hurricane Harvey. If a disaster is declared, then they can go back to the 8% increase, and so without seeking voter approval. And there's a legal battle going on right now, and it's kind of turning into a real discussion, because you're seeing interest groups like the Municipal League weigh in on it, and they're saying that we do think that we have the right to increase rates at a steeper rate without seeking voter approval because of the disaster that was declared. So it's going to come down to what's the intent of the bill. Does an economic disaster qualify as a disaster? So that's just something to also watch out for. And why I bring that up is because let's just say that the taxing jurisdictions win that battle, that they get to increase tax rates at a higher rate without seeking voter approval. They've essentially cut you out of the picture for having a part of that, a say-so in your tax bill in that part of the process. But what you do have a say-so on every year is that you can file a protest. And so I think that we need to really pay attention to protesting our property taxes this year. What complicates things is that the deadlines are all over the place this year. In Collin, it's June 15th. In Dallas, it's June 15th this year. In Denton, it's May 29th. In Rockwall, we've already passed that. It's May 15th. And in Tarrant County, it's going to be June 1st. So there's a lot of dates there. If you go to help.propertytax.io and search 2020 deadlines, these will pop up in an article there. So you can easily find that there. So again, you can go to help.propertytax.io and just search protest deadlines, and we have an article for that right there. So I just want to reiterate again that the most direct impact you're going to have is that you can protest the value with the appraisal district. I'm here today to talk to you about how to do that the right way. And what I think the right way to do is, how do you make a decision maker's job easy? So a decision maker, there's two kinds of decision makers in this process. One of them is an appraisal district appraiser. So when you file a protest, the district appraiser that gets assigned to a district appraiser at the appraisal district, they can review your case at that point and make you an offer to reduce the value. So they are a decision maker in this process. If you don't like the value that they come up with, or if if they make you no offer to reduce the value, then you can go on to this next level, which is called the appraisal review board hearing. And that's a separate set of decision makers. So the ARB is a separate entity from the appraisal district. They're just tax-paying citizens like you and me. A lot of people get nervous about this part of the process because they kind of confuse it with going to court. I see that a lot. You know, people feel like they have to show up in court. When you go to an ARB hearing, you are sworn in to the hearing, but that's about as formal as it gets. I just want to convey also that these are just normal people. They're not there to hold value, and they're there to just be a referee in the process between you and the appraisal district. So you don't really need to get nervous when you have to go to an ARB hearing. And I'm going to go into what that's going to look like this year, because it is going to be a little bit different this year because of COVID. My website is PropertyTax.io. We're most known for our instant and free analysis, where you can type in your address and we analyze the comps that are relevant for your property, and we adjust them using the appraisal district system, which I'll get into in a little bit. It's very different than how a lot of people value real estate. And we give you a window into what it looks like, so that you can tell if the evidence that I'm going to present is actually going to be effective or not. So in over 10 years of working in property tax, I learned that the appraisal districts have a huge technological advantage. When I was first starting out, I was really frustrated when I would go in there with some evidence. I had a comp I wanted to use to get a value lower for one of my clients, and the appraisal district would input that comp into their system, and then they would make all these adjustments to it, and then before I knew it, they would say, well, actually that comp comes in a lot higher than what you're presenting on how you valued it. And I grew frustrated at that, because just in a click of a mouse, essentially, or a few clicks of the mouse, the district appraiser had blown up my argument, and my strategy going in there wasn't going to work. And so I would have to think on my feet, and I just didn't like how it was going. I wanted to go in there with a plan. I wanted to know, this evidence is going to work out the way that I think it is, or how can I prepare for the evidence that might hurt me better going in there? You know, how can I be proactive about the information that they might present to try to keep a value higher? And so I set out to fix that problem with PropertyTax.io. And this, so I was alluded to that I went to A&M, graduated from A&M. This is my jab back at you. I'm going to throw in an A&M slide there. Yeah.
Hey, Glenn, excuse me one second. Just
Sure.
want to ask you, and I don't mean to interrupt, but there are a couple questions coming in. Do you want to leave those for the end?
Why don't you guys monitor those while I'm going, and if you think it's relevant for what I'm talking about right now, and you want me to dig in a little bit more into a particular topic, I can do that. But if it's not really related to what I'm doing, it's just a general question, let's circle back and answer those at the end, and we will get all the questions answered. Yes, yeah, so you use your judgment call, and if you feel like you want me to dig into something more, interrupt me and ask me, probe a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So this just reiterates, TexAgs is an online forum in Harris County. They're really active with property tax. And this guy essentially just said the same thing, that he had a house that had the same floor plan as him in the same neighborhood, and it was valued at $11,000 less. But when he went into the appraisal district, they made all these adjustments, and they said it pretty much equals the value of my property. So this is a huge problem that I saw. I was personally experiencing it. And so we level the playing field with just the click of a mouse. So we make it really easy for the normal homeowner to produce evidence that's compliant with the appraisal district system. And I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the evidence that we produce. Again, I don't want this to be confused with a big commercial for our product itself. I'm going to talk about ways that you can produce this type of evidence without using my product, but we make it super convenient and fast and easy. This applies if you're going to use my product or not. We like to present our evidence in this kind of way, where we start off with an executive summary. Because I think where a lot of people make mistakes when they're submitting evidence is that they're not very clear about what they're asking for and why they're asking for it. And so it's just start off with an executive summary. Just say, here's the value that I'm asking for, and here's why I'm asking for it. So in this particular case, we're saying we're asking for $462,000, and we're basing that off of a sales comparison approach of some comps that we pulled from the area, and then we get it, and then we say we're going to get into more detail on that in a little bit. But basically, they just know, okay, this person is saying 462, and they're basing it off of recent sales in the area. Okay, great. I also like to do this is, the appraisal districts use maps a lot to gain credibility about telling a story about your property. And I think that's important too, is this evidence is a story that you're telling to the decision maker. So the map is a good way of giving a geographical awareness of where you're located. So like, let's say that you're in an ARB hearing. You want them to know the ARB where you're located. So kind of have like a big zoomed out version of that. So you can go onto Google Maps or something like that, look up your address and just start zooming out a little bit so that they can see some major roads, so they get a good general sense of where your property is located. That's we provide that embedded in the report automatically, but you can go to Google Maps and do a screenshot of your own property there. I think that adds a lot of value, because what you're doing there now is you're taking control of the narrative of telling people about your property instead of relying on the appraisal district to tell them about your property. We also include all the stats about your property in our report, and I'll kind of get into the nuances of some of this data and how, if you don't have access to this data, what you can supplement for the data. So we speak the appraisal district language in our report. We have these things called building quality ratings. Building quality ratings. In Collin County, the building quality rating is going to closely correlate with the builder of the property. So if it's like a Dries home, it'll be a certain building quality rating. If it's a David Weekley home, it'll be a different building quality rating. They have actually codes for this. So this one is an RF12. But if you don't have access to, and actually Collin County does not make that information available on their website, the actual building quality rating. We get all of our information through extensive open records requests. So if you're just the normal homeowner out there, or agent, and you don't have time to do the open records request like we do, what you can do is go onto their website, look up a property, and then scroll down to the deed history, and you can view the builder from the deed history, because they'll be one of the first owners of that property that they have. And then, so just say that I'm comparing Dries homes to Dries homes. That step alone will separate you from the vast majority of people that present evidence there, because a lot of people mix and match these building quality ratings. Building quality rating for a home in 1956. Cheryl asked that question. I don't, if it's 1950, if it's a McKinney home, it's probably going to be like a RV5 or RV4 or something like that, because that's probably going to be closer in the east side of McKinney. But building quality ratings are, they vary. I think Collin County has over almost 30 building quality ratings, so it's going to be all over the board. And then in Dallas County, all the appraisal districts have different ways of doing building quality ratings. So like Dallas County will have just a number like 8 or 10, and Dallas County actually does make that available on their online website. Collin's the only one that doesn't make that available on their website. One thing I'd really like to focus on, because where I see a lot of people make a lot of mistakes with their assumptions about how a property is going to grade out, and this kind of goes back to my earlier screenshot of the TexAgs guy who all the adjustments and everything, is this line item for additional improvements. So you see like things like attached garage and covered porches. The appraisal district actually assigns a value and makes adjustments for that. And the covered porches are surprisingly high values than what you would think. Like, so this one has, what is it? Well over about 14,000 in covered porch values. So if you're not adjusting for that, you can be off on $10,000 on your adjustment just from covered porches. Again, they do make it available on the website. Collin does, the additional improvements, but they don't make available the value with that. So they just say that covered porch and then the square footage. We get it through open records, and that's how we get our information. If you filed an appeal online and you checked that you wanted to request their evidence, they would send you that information back about the values associated with those additional improvements for the comps that they're using. Again, when you're doing a sales comparison analysis, I think maps are really important and part of that process to show where the comps are located relative to your property, and provide a table that just kind of shows how similar the property is to your property. So we're showing things like square footage. We do this thing, the appraisal district has what's called like a neighborhood code. That's appraisal district speak. If you don't have access to the open records like we do, you can just say the name of the neighborhood that you live in. And if you kind of live in a big master plan community that has different phases, make sure that you're pulling comps, if you can, that are in the same phase as your property is. So because that's how they designate neighborhood codes, is not just in the same master plan community, but in the same phase of a master plan community, or at least a very similar market to your neighborhood. So I've talked a lot about the technology and the data that goes into the system, and your head might be spinning right now because you're thinking this is, I don't have time to get into the details like Glenn has with his website. But I'm here to kind of dial it back a little bit and say that your biggest advantage is that you know more about your property than anybody else, and that you can actually beat the appraisal district system in some relatively easy ways that I'm going to show you. So here's a headline that I took from the Dallas Morning News from a couple of years ago. It says, here's how I knocked $13,000 off my property tax appraisal in 30 minutes. This process was so easy, I'm vowing to protest every year. And it was written by Leona Allen. Leona did not use our product, but we took her workflow and built it into our product. And I'm going to show you what she did, and then I'm going to show you what we're doing in our application now. So this is what Leona did. She filed her protest online. She got a realtor friend to gather recent sales of comparables of her home in her neighborhood. And then this is the step that I think took her beyond what the normal person would do, was she got photos of recent sales from Zillow and Trulia. And then in her hearing, the district appraiser lowered the value to the average of the recent sales that she brought in. So she was happy with that result. She was successful, and she didn't think it was too difficult to do that. And you can see that these are not that hard of steps to do. Somebody like me who's looking at this process, when I first saw it, I was punching all kinds of holes in it. I was like saying, well, she probably wasn't looking at, was $13,000 enough of a reduction? Could she have gotten $30,000 if she had done this, this, and this? Should she be looking at the average of the recent sales, or should she be weighing her value more on properties that are the most similar to hers? Things like that. But at the end of the day, what I want you to take away from this is that this was a relatively easy process that Leona did. It was her first time to file a protest, and she was successful with it. And so don't be intimidated by the system that I was just describing before, because I think if you have photos that are part of your presentation, I think that is very powerful, because when you just go in there with just comps, just information on a spreadsheet, let's say, the appraisal district is just going to take that information and put it into their system, and now they're kind of driving the ship with what's being discussed. When you bring in photos, they can't put the photos into their system. What that does is now you're controlling the narrative. You're able to talk about things on a common sense way that you're getting out of the analytics, essentially, in a way. You're saying, here's my kitchen versus this comp's kitchen, and look at the photos. And now everybody's concentrating on your evidence instead of what the appraisal district system is saying. So here's how we built that into our system.
So Glenn, can I ask you a question first? Can you go back to that 13,000? Go back 2 slides. So, so she got $13,000 off and invested 30 minutes of time. What does that $13,000 off on her tax appraisal? What does that save her in property taxes?
That's about $300 in property taxes.
$300. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So even if somebody spent an hour instead of 30 minutes, I mean, that's $300 an hour. That's pretty good change.
Right.
So she got in the game, basically, I think is your point, is get in the game.
Yes. Yeah, get in the game. And also keep in mind that the appraisal district doesn't necessarily revalue a property every year. And so that reduction could potentially stand for 2 years, maybe not. if they did it.
Yeah.
So that $300 could turn into $600 in savings if they keep the value the same. I know that in my neighborhood, they kept the value the same 2 years. I live in Dallas County, but in my neighborhood, they kept the value the same for 2 years in a row. So it's not unheard of that they don't revalue properties every year in certain areas. And I think you're seeing in Collin County, what I was presenting earlier, that there were very minor increases in value this year. So if you've got evidence that's take what's on the table. I'm telling you, take what's on the table in any given year, because you never know the compounding effect that can have.
So Glenn, if you don't mind me to jump in, that was one of
Yes.
the questions, is in reference to Collin County, how some of the other counties, I think you mentioned Carrollton, how it had bumped up. So what do you attribute it to, with so many sales occurring in Collin County? I'm curious what you attribute it to the more flat numbers.
Well, Collin was aggressive last year with their increases. They went up 10%. And I think they overshot some markets by a good amount. And I think this year they looked at it, and I think that they realized, well, maybe we overshot it a little bit last year, and we don't have the market evidence to support more increases. Another thing that Collin does is, I was seeing this in certain areas last year where I was trying to present evidence of sales that were in February and in March of so I'm going back a year. So their data valuation last year was January 1st of 2019. And I was trying, and Collin County has this rule where they don't accept comps. This is both at the ARB and at the appraisal district, that they won't accept comps that sell past January 31st. And this is something that didn't really communicate out to everybody. And so when I'm working cases, I'm presenting comps that have sold in February and March, and they're saying, oh, we can't accept those. And those were the sales that were helping me the most. And so I think what we were seeing was a little bit of a softening in the market from the values that they were showing from last year that they weren't accounting for, and now they're accounting for it this year. And so I don't necessarily think it's saying that the market is softening as much as I think it's saying that they were high on values last year, and now they're working with a data set that's more reflecting a less white hot market. Because if you go back 2 years in Collin County, we were really hot, really, really hot. And if you go back 1 year, we're still a good market, but we're not nearly as hot as we were 2 years ago. And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing in the appraisal district numbers, is that they're just kind of playing catch up with having reflected white hot information last year, when really it wasn't white hot. It was still good, but not white hot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the slide that I was referring to was early on when you came to a Collin County slide. That was 10 minutes or so ago. But when you came to that slide, it showed like a 0%. Maybe it was a different point.
No, that's what I'm talking about. I think because last year Collin County was almost the 10.
Last year, you mean for assessments for 2019?
That's right. Assessments for 2019, Collin County increased values by 10% last year.
Okay.
So they were super aggressive last year, and I think they may have overshot a lot of markets. And I think this year they reassessed. When I say reassessed, I mean they looked at the information again, and I think they saw that they were a little high last year, and that now you're kind of seeing their values are just kind of catching up to the too high values last year. Maybe look more like reasonable values this year with the appreciation that we've seen. I think that last year they were maybe a little too ahead in certain areas of where the January 1st of 2019 value really was. And so this year, I think that they just didn't have the information to work with like they did last year, because again, if you look at Collin County 2 years ago, white hot. If you look at Collin County 1 year ago, good market, but not white hot like you were seeing 2 years ago. And so it's just a different data set of comps that I think they're working with. I don't think that means that we're in a bad market. I just think that they were super aggressive last year.
I see.
Yeah.
A person has asked that they live in Richardson, and the Dallas CAD letter shows the value the same as last year, but the homestead cap limitation, which is subtracted to come up and
Right.
appraised value is only 1/3 of the value that was shown for last year. Why is that?
The appraised value is only 1/3 of the value that was shown for last year.
I saw that question, Glenn. I think what is happening is she's eating up her cap. You know, I know Glenn this year got a big increase in his property value, and he's got maybe 25,000 or so that's protected by the cap. Next year, he won't have 25% protected by the cap. He'll only have maybe 15% protected by the cap. So I think that's probably what happened is you're seeing that cap diminish until you get caught up.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was warning about
Mhm.
in one of my earlier slides, talking about how in Tarrant County you saw a 0% median increase in value, but you saw the appraised values increase by 4.5%. It's a very complex, topic where the appraised value can go up however much the appraisal district thinks it needs to go up to reflect what they think the value will sell for on January 1st of that year. The appraised value kind of holds back your tax bill to own, where you're not going to just have a crazy increase in your tax bill every year, but it can go up a maximum of 10% every year. So when you're seeing areas that were super aggressive with market valuations a year or 2 years ago, you're in the years that precede that follow that, you're going to see the market value essentially pull that appraised value up every year until they equal out and get to the same. It's a hard topic to communicate without a whiteboard, really.
Yeah. Somebody has asked, do you cover valuations for Hunt County market?
No, not in Hunt County. We're currently in Collin, Dallas, Denton, Tarrant, Rockwall, and Harris.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then somebody from Richardson was asking about the building quality rating for a home that was built in 1956.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the building quality rating is somewhat corresponds with the year built of the property because it's going to be a different materials that are used, different style of home that they would have built back then. So I'm not sure. I know I'm in Dallas County. I'm in the city of Dallas, and my home was built in the 50s, and we're a building quality 15, if that means anything. I don't know. You see, Richardson straddles both Dallas and Collin County, so I'm not sure which county you're in. But yeah, I don't know. If you're in Dallas County, you can go look up your property online, and they'll actually say the building quality rating there. But if you're in Collin County, they don't show it there, and I wouldn't know offhand what it is.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So here's how we say that you should use photos to beat the appraisal district system. This is what Leona did that I was talking about. So you can use photos to show things like this comp's kitchen is nicer than my kitchen. And this is what you can do in our application. You can upload your own photo of your kitchen. And what you're doing in this process is you're doing a side-by-side comparison of a comparables kitchen and your kitchen. And you're saying that it would take me $25,000 to upgrade my kitchen to look like this kitchen. And what that happens is in the report, it overrides the appraisal district's default condition adjustment. And you're saying, I disagree with that condition based on the photos that I've uploaded, and I think it should be more like $25,000. And so what you're doing with that process is you're getting them out of the appraisal district system, and you're having them focus on photos. So this is how it looks in the report. So if you had a Microsoft Office Word document or something like that, you could copy and paste photos into there and put them side by side, and you could just put a comment that says, my kitchen isn't as nice as this, and it would take me $25,000 to upgrade to that. So I think that's a very useful process because they're going to pay attention to, people like to look at photos more than they like to look at tables and things like that. So I've talked a lot about the software that we do, but we also are a good service. We coach you along the way. And I'm going to show you an example of where our coaching and software kind of intersect and produce a really good result for somebody. So this happened last year. The title of it is that comps pool only worth $4,000? It seems like I'm being valued too high based on a glitch in the appraisal district system. So this is a true story about how we coached one of our users to produce evidence to be very successful at the ARB hearing. So he was noticed at 448,000. Oops, there we go. Noticed at 448,000, and he went to our website and we said he should be more like 425,000. He filed his online protest and got the appraisal district's evidence. Yeah. The appraisal district emailed him an offer to reduce the value to 441,000, and they provided 4 comps that they were using. So he went into our system and checked the 4 comps that the appraisal district was using, and noticed how it equals 441,000 because we reverse engineered their systems. And he noticed that one of the comps had a pool. He's focused on that because his property does not have a pool, so he wants to look in that a little bit further. And he said that pool's valued at $12,000. So he found a photo of it. And he said that there's no way that pool is a $12,000 pool. It's got stone around it, things like that. It's more like a $25,000 pool. And you can tell by the photo that that's a very nice pool. And, you know, so he's making his own adjustment for that. And you can notice how that value on the left is going down when he makes that adjustment. So he finds another property that has a pool, again, finds that photo of it. And what he found out about this one was that the appraisal district was only assigning a $4,000 value to that pool. And so again, he says that that's not a $4,000 pool, so he's decreasing it down. So what you're seeing there is that he is taking the appraisal district's own evidence, kind of turning it on their head. But he notices that the pool are kind of an issue. So he's like, what if I just remove the pools from the equation and I only focus on the 2 comps that they didn't have a pool? So he goes into the ARB hearing and he shows the photos of the pools that they're worth way more, and that the ARB panel reduced his value to 430,000. So again, what he did in that process was he requested the appraisal district's evidence. That's a crucial part of the step, because when you request the appraisal district's evidence, they have to provide you that evidence 14 days before your hearing. And they cannot change that evidence once they send it to you. So what that allows you to do is adjust your strategy with information. You know, what a lot of people do is they don't request the appraisal district's evidence. They file a protest. They go to the ARB hearing and they're just not at all prepared, and they're seeing the information that's going to be used against them for the first time in the hearing, and they're kind of scrambling about, what do I do? You know, I just don't, you know, I don't really understand what's going on. I have to look at the comps, and they're eating up time, and so they don't have a good strategy going into it. This guy had a good strategy going into it. He knew exactly what he wanted to talk about because he requested their evidence, and he was able to pick it apart using our system. He was able to show things like that pool is worth way more. So he chatted into our system after the hearing because he was really excited about that. And he said that the tip about the pool made all the difference, because what he did was he sent us their evidence, and we said that those pool values are way too low. And so he said that the ARB chairman actually thanked him for a concise presentation. I think that's important, because you got to keep in mind that these district appraisers are there all day, and they just want to get through, or not district appraiser, that the ARB is there all day, and they want to get through as many cases as they can. And I think when somebody goes in there that's like super prepared and is concise and very targeted with what they want to talk about, that separates you from what I was talking about earlier, which is with somebody who goes in there that's not prepared, and they're kind of stumbling around trying to gather their thoughts and just trying to buy time while they try to digest what information they just saw from the appraisal district. I think that gets old and frustrating to watch. So at a minimum, go in there with a plan, be concise, know exactly what you want to talk about. And I think requesting the appraisal district's evidence reduces the surprises that you'll come up with at the hearing, and you'll be more confident with the information you're going in there with. To just kind of put context around this, the owners, he said that the owners were on a 0-7 losing streak before he went in there. And I like this because he said, without you and the report, he couldn't have done it. And I like that because it says "and," because it's a combination of the expertise that we bring to the table with our coaching and our lifelines that you can chat in with experts like me, and the software that we provide that you can do things like showing photos and things like that to kind of pick apart evidence as well as produce your own evidence.
So Glenn, a question is, do you recommend calling the appraiser first to do the adjustment, or go straight to the board review?
This year, it's going to be very different than years past. So here's what I suggest you do. File an online protest. They're begging you to do that this year, to file an online protest. If you go to help.propertytax.io and search like Collin County online protest, we have instructions on how to do that. Submit your evidence when you do the online protest. And in Collin County, you can check a box to request the appraisal district's evidence when you file that online protest. So you can take care of a whole lot of things going through that process. So I strongly recommend that you use the online protest this year. Submit your evidence when you do that, and then request the appraisal district's evidence all at the same time. What that's going to do is it's going to trigger, that's going to assign your case to a district appraiser, and they're going to reach out to you with an offer to reduce the value or not to reduce the value. If they don't reduce the value, or if they reduce the value but it's not to a value that you are happy with, I think you should try to call the appraisal district this year. Normally, I would say go in and talk to them in person, but there's going to be no in-person processes this year. So I think that you should attempt to call them. And where this comes into, where this kind of actually ties into this next slide, because there's going to be no in-person meetings, that means your written communication is going to be very, very important this year. So just doing things that are simple, like numbering your pages on your reports, so that if you do get through to somebody and you're on a phone call with a district appraiser, you can say, turn to page 4 in my packet, instead of saying, find this page with this on it. And that'll make the process go smoother and easier. And because it's just, we all know this, but communicating on the phone is very different than communicating in person. In the past, people used to be able to go in there with like a manila folder and have their kind of evidence, you know, it could be good evidence, but it wasn't really well organized, and they were able to kind of glue it together with their conversation that they were having with somebody. They would say, well, I've got this piece of evidence, pull it out of the folder. I've got this piece of evidence, pull it out of the folder. You won't be able to do that this year. So I really think you have to be very organized with your report. And that's, you know, again, with my product, PropertyTax.io, it's a very organized report. If you don't use PropertyTax.io, I suggest that you go onto our website, PropertyTax.io, and we have some sample reports on there. At a minimum, just try to reconstruct what we've done on your own. Use our format that we use. Do an executive summary. Have a page that's dedicated to, you're telling them about your property. Essentially, I've got this many square feet, I live in this area. In the executive summary, be sure and say why you're requesting your value. If you're doing it on a sales comparison approach, and you're not using PropertyTax.io, maybe go into Microsoft Excel and do a spreadsheet of the properties and print that off and attach that. But be sure and number the pages, because I think that'll make it very easy if you're caught on a phone conversation to do that. Now, there's also, we don't know this for sure, but there may not even be in-person ARB hearings. There's a bit of a legal challenge on that. Ken Paxton, our Attorney General, has come out and said that you should not be forced to waive your right for an in-person ARB hearing. So I think what that's going to end up looking like is that the appraisal district and the ARB is going to give you the option of a remote hearing. And if you say, I don't want a remote hearing, then your hearing is probably going to be way later in the year than it normally would. So a lot of people are going to take them up on that remote hearing, which could be a teleconference. It might be a Zoom conference or something like that. I really don't know what that's going to look like. They have not. I think this is a huge problem for the appraisal districts, and they're trying to figure it out, to be honest, because there's a lot of legal issues that go on with it. And so, but regardless, I think you need to prepare ahead of time. I think, you know, it sounds complicated, but it's really not. Like, think about this process. You're going to file an online protest with your evidence. So if you're going to go through the process of gathering your evidence, do your time block for that part of the process up front. Just knock it out. You know, if you go to PropertyTax.io, we've got a nice report that's ready for you, super convenient. But if you want to do it yourself, just follow the suggestions that I've said. Just executive summary, maybe a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet in there that shows your information, calculate it out, number your pages, things like that, and just send it in. And then that way you'll be ready no matter what. if you have to do a teleconference with somebody, you've already got the information ready to go. There's no extra work you have to do on research. If you have to go to the ARB hearing, no big deal if it's done by teleconference, because you've got all your research done and it's well organized, So just use that time block up front to be prepared for these circumstances.
A question that's come in is, what if the property sales used to value the home are all sold in the summer? Does your system provide other comparable homes to use in the hearing?
So you're talking about this summer that we're talking about, current in 2020?
No, we're talking, I guess it was past summer, probably.
Oh, well, yeah. So we follow.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm not sure about the question.
Well, I'll answer both ways. I'll answer both ways. So depending on the appraisal district you're in, the data, I call it a data set. The time frame of sales is going to be different. Since we're probably mainly speaking to a Collin County crowd, I'll talk about that. Collin County, the sweet spot for sales is going to be February of 2019 to January 31st of 2020. Keep in mind that both the appraisal district and the Collin County Appraisal Review Board are locked in to that January 31st deadline. They will not go past that to hear comps. So we tried last year. Trust me, we tried, and it just did not work. So our system actually blocks you from that of going beyond that, because not that I don't agree with their policies, but it's just not effective. If we give you a comp that sold in March and it helps your case, and it's just easily dismissed just in a nanosecond because they say it's beyond January 31st, that blows up your strategy going in there. And so what we're trying to do is keep you tight with the strategy that's going in there, with what's going to work. Now, we can all be up in arms about how we disagree with that policy, but I'm just telling you from experience, not just from my own personal experience, but from serving in Collin County. We have thousands of people that use our website. From their experience as well, going beyond January 31st does not work. It just does not work. As much as I hate that, and I don't like to see it, it's the reality of the situation. And so a lot of people get frustrated with us because we don't provide sales past that date. But I'm just telling you, as the creator of the application, it's for your own good. Because if we provided you information that helps you, but it's just quickly dismissed because it's beyond a date, then now that hurts you. It might feel good in the moment to produce evidence that helps you, but it's going to feel really bad in the moment when they just quickly dismiss it and it doesn't help you at all.
Are you talking to me about that?
I was kind of looking at you when I was saying that, but part of me is looking in the mirror that's in front of me also. So
yeah, we had a big discussion last year about that, and I don't agree with that policy at all. I don't think it makes any sense. But Glenn is right. He's being pragmatic about it, and it's just not going to work for you. If you got into arbitration, it might work, but it's just not going to work at the ARB level. Joe asked a question about, do I have to provide my evidence at the time I file the protest, or can I provide it later? And Joe, I'm glad you asked that question. The answer is no. The main thing is to get your protest in. If you can do it a one-time shot, give everything, that's best. But if you're looking at the deadline, then get the protest filed and worry about the evidence later. And you know when the deadline is, don't you? It's the day before the real deadline. Okay, so do not wait till the last minute to do this. Glenn can tell you, every year we get into technology issues, and there's been
not on our website, not on the appraisal district's website.
On the appraisal district's website. So you don't want to be trying to get your protest filed at 10 o'clock on the last day online, because their system may go down.
And actually, like with Collin County, you cannot actually submit your evidence when you file the appeal. It has to go through a system, and then they have to unlock that capability for you. That it's usually an email that you receive within 10 minutes of filing your protest. And then they say, okay, now you can upload evidence. So if you're going through the online protest system and you're wondering, where do I upload my evidence in Collin County? You have to actually file the protest first, and then they will send you an email, usually within 10 minutes of you filing the protest, and then you can go into your online portal and upload your evidence at that time. But I do suggest that you get your evidence uploaded as close to the time period of you filing the protest as possible. because that you never know when a district appraiser is going to pick up that case and start working it. And so you want to make sure that they have your evidence when they start working your case. This is just a recap because I think the executive summary is just a super simple but very important part of evidence to present. Just state, here's my opinion of value and why I'm asking for that value. And it's not hard to do your homework, and it makes the decision maker's job a lot easier. So keep in mind that these are going to be difficult times for the district appraisers also. They're out of their normal processes. And so the easier you make their job, I think and that's by presenting organized and well-communicated information, the more success that you're going to have. Our biggest reward is when we help somebody who's never filed a protest get in the game. You know, I like this word that keeps coming up with chats with people that have never filed a protest. They file the protest and they get a reduction. They feel empowered. Like they actually say the word empowered. And if you've been out, if you're somebody that's listening to this and you have filed a protest before and you've been through the process, I would encourage you to also be a coach to your community. Maybe post on nextdoor.com about how to do it, or on your neighborhood Facebook page. Or if you're a realtor that's out there, email your clients about it and encourage them to get in the game, because it seems like, you know, there's a lot of people that just don't do this process. And I think a lot more people need to look into it, because it's a way that we can reduce our mortgage payments every month. And I think a lot of people just kind of let it go and don't pay attention to it, but it's an important part of our system. It involves participation. And it does feel good to get results, and it's really not that hard. So just to wrap up, I would encourage people to go to our free resources, help.propertytax.io, and you can search for things like homestead on there. We have all kinds of other topics you can search for as well. So when you search for homestead, you get things like qualifying for homestead, how to file past the deadline, the quote unquote deadline, what the real deadline to file an appeal is, which I won't get into now. And then where you can find a document to file the homestead exemption. We also created a website that's also free called PropertyTaxUniversity.com, and it has it's like a bunch of online learning courses that we have. If you're new to the game and you just want to know more about the process, I would suggest going to the far left one, which is understanding your value. If you've been through the protest process before and you kind of like what I've been talking about, that's more analytics and more evidence-based, go to evidence in an appeal, where we talk about the differences between price per square foot and an adjusted value. Just real quick on that, price per square foot is a big mistake I see a lot of people make, because the appraisal district is going to make all these adjustments to a property that a price per square foot does not take into account. So a price per square foot doesn't take into account the land adjustment of a property that backs up to a green belt versus a property that's an interior lot. It doesn't take into account a property that has a pool versus one that doesn't have a pool, and the list goes on. And so the appraisal district will just kind of beat up on a price per square foot. And so, because they use an adjusted value, which is what we also do. And so we go through how to do that in that course. Another one that's kind of helpful is exemptions. So if you've got clients, or maybe you're listening in on this and you're over 65 and you're thinking about selling your home, what's going to happen with my over 65 tax ceiling? How is that going to be handled with my new property? We kind of go over things like that. We also just go over homestead exemption issues as well. So that's it for my presentation.
All right, so let me ask you, Glenn, there are a few more questions, but because we have a number of agents who have clients on here, is there any way to show the participants so that they can say hello by chance?
Don't think there is. This is Jim. I've been looking to see if I can do that, and
Okay.
I can give you a list at the end.
Yeah, I know, but
we may want to consider doing, instead of Zoom webinars, Zoom meetings. With the meetings, you can see them. With a webinar, you can't, though.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's the difference.
So I don't know. We have over 50 people here, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
At some point,
no, great attendance. But there are a few more questions though that have been asked.
Okay.
One was asked: the taxes that we see in I guess it's precinct 2020 will be based on appraisal value of home. I'm not sure I understand that question. The taxes we see in
2020. Okay, in the year 2020, I'm trying to find that question. Oh wow, there's a lot of questions. Let me see here. Okay, I found that question. Will be based on appraised value of home. Well, I'll try to. I'm kind of having trouble exactly. Maybe you can type in more some clarification on that. But I'll try to answer what I think you're asking, and just tell me if I'm off on that. They're valuing the properties of January 1st of 2020. That's what that's what their computer modeling is saying, that they think that your property would sell for on January 1st. And so there's really two parts of the process. Is there's notice values that are sent out, and those values are determined using computer modeling. So they look at like aggregate information where they group properties together by neighborhood and by building quality rating. And they look at things like the average price per square foot last year versus this year. And they decide to reappraise areas based on differences that they see in those aggregate calculations. So that's how they send out notices. When you file a protest, that's a totally different standard of valuation that gets moved into, where now it's not a computer that's modeling it on aggregate information, but rather it's a specific appraiser at the appraisal district, and they're pulling specific comparable properties for your property. So it's a much more customized valuation experience when you file a protest versus the value you receive when you receive your appraisal notice. So that's another benefit to filing a protest, is that you get a fine comb, brush over of what your value should really look like, versus relying on aggregate information from a computer spitting out a value at you.
Do you see other questions there quickly? And while you're looking at the questions, the person that asked about the building quality in Richardson, we have an agent who slipped me a note who worked for many years at the Dallas Appraisal District, and he is suggesting that the building quality would probably be 15 for a 1950s tractor.
I'm a 15. Yeah. So that's what I said, was I'm a 15. So it's good to, we're on the same, I'm on the same page with the former district appraiser with that. So that's
okay. Good. There you go. Good. Thank you, Jack.
So and we know why we have a district appraiser, former district appraiser on, I hope that I communicate today that, and this is not something I'm doing just because we have that particular individual on this. This is something I like to communicate in all webinars, is that the district appraisers are often portrayed as the man, or somebody who's out to get you. And I want to kind of dispel that notion that these are just people that have a job to do. Sometimes their job is really stressful because they're having to tell people what, people are going in there talking about their taxes, and they have a job to do, which is kind of look at the value. And if there's really not much they can do to lower the value based on the evidence that's being presented, they have to be fair about that process and say that they can't give you a reduction. And so sometimes they get yelled at a lot with people that are frustrated by the process, and they kind of are the punching bag for that. So I always encourage people to try to stay as professional as you can when dealing with the district appraisers. Understand that they're just human beings like you and me, and that in general, for the vast majority of district appraisers that I've dealt with, is that they're good people that want to help you out. And I think the way that you help them out is by doing your homework and being prepared, and respecting the position that they come from, that they're going to be evidence-based. And so you need to be evidence-based with what you're requesting as well. Somebody asked how you request the ARB's evidence for your property with Dallas. I don't think you can request online with Dallas. I know that when you file a protest online with Dallas, they kind of open up the system and they say, here's kind of what the sales in your neighborhood and all of that, but they don't provide you the specific comps that they're using to value your property at that level. The only way I know of to request that evidence from Dallas is to do it by mail. You have to mail it in. So if you go to help.propertytax.io and you search for request evidence, you'll see an article that comes up about that. So just write in on a simple mail, I'm requesting my evidence for this use for my property. Identify your property by the address, and then ideally you would have the account number that the appraisal district is associating with your property with that as well. So you say, I filed a protest, I'm requesting my 14-day evidence request formally with this mail. Do it by certified mail so you can prove when you mailed it. That's the best way I know to do it in Dallas County. They don't make it quite as convenient to actually do a formal request for the evidence as they do in Collin County. Can you touch on Dallas, Richardson, Homestead County implementations again last year? Okay.
Hearing great comments about how great the presentation is and lots of good information. So really nice comments, lots of good information, Jim and Glenn.
Yeah, okay. The taxes we see in October 2020 will be based on appraised value of home now. Yes, the tax bill, well, unless you file a protest and you get the value reduced. So if your tax bill that you receive in October of 2020 is going to reflect the value of your, that's what we're discussing right now, is how can you impact your tax bill that's going to come out in October? If you do nothing, whatever they noticed you at is going to be the value that your tax bill is going to reflect. If you file a protest and you get the value reduced, then that's what your tax bill is going to reflect. So filing a protest is what's called a preemptive measure to reduce your future tax bill. You're taking a step now to reduce the tax burden that you're going to incur in the future. Expanding coverage to include more counties. We're focusing on. Our goal is to expand as much as possible across Texas. We're kind of focusing on major metropolitan corridors. So this was our first year to expand outside of the DFW area. We went to Harris County. We're looking for and we're going to kind of fill in around Harris County, like Fort Bend and Montgomery County. And we're trying to rapidly expand to the major metropolitan areas in all of Texas. What's harder for us is some of the smaller counties that are more rural based. It's hard for our algorithm to value properties that are on a lot of them are on acreage. And so we'll get to those eventually, but just, honestly speaking, we're focusing on major metropolitan areas for expansion first, and then we're going to fill in from there.
Okay.
And then somebody asked if we filed protest for homeowners. We do have an offering that's called our gold package, where we do file protest for homeowners, but we have to qualify that property for that service because we're a relatively small company as far as agents go right now. And so we can't just take on a whole lot of cases for everybody. So if you go to your instant free analysis, which is, you see a big red button on your screen right now that says click here to view instant free analysis, we'll tell you if that property qualifies for the gold package or not. But if it doesn't, we still have our silver package, which is a lot of what I was talking about today. Okay.
Yeah, I've got the homepage up there, and we'll go through a couple of things here. Are you able to see that whole screen, Glenn?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is what you get when you go to PropertyTax.io. This is where you're going to start. We're going to come back in a minute, and we're going to actually show you what you see when you put a property address in there. But just going to scroll down here. Here's the article from the watchdog reporter, Dave Lieber. Really is enthused about our program. This is a page out of the analysis, and you can see the mapping there. Glenn didn't touch too much on the maps, but the maps are really important, and we've got some really nice maps. And I'll be honest with you, the maps are better than what the appraisal district has. And if the Dallas appraiser is in here, I'm sure he will vouch for that. So scroll down. If you go to the website, I would say if you do nothing else, this button right here, watch the full app demo. That's a walkthrough where Glenn's actually taking you and showing you how you can create our basic report, and with just not much effort, really enhance it and do a lot better report. You can see a sample report right here. View the pricing right here, which most people get the silver program, which is $75. And all of the Ebby agents will be partners as soon as they sign up. And that gets you $10 off if you use their partner code. And let's see, I can scroll down here a little bit. These are some statistics here. Let's see if we get the right one right here. This is kind of where our coverage area is. We're pretty heavy in Collin and Denton County and Dallas County. And getting over into Tarrant County more and more. We added Harris County this year and Rockwall. So almost $1 million in taxes saved through our system. Somebody asked a question the other day in a webinar, what's the typical success rate? And as you can see, it's about 80% chance of success that you're going to get a reduction with it. It's not perfect, but there is a guarantee, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Most people saved around $450. That's another question that people ask a lot. So the guarantee, Glenn, tell us, I know you're making some changes with that. If you recommend that they make a purchase and they don't get a reduction, I know you have a guarantee that they get their money back. How does that work?
If you don't reduce the value by at least $5,000, we refund your purchase in full. So if we recommend that you make a purchase of the silver package and you don't get at least 5,000 off, so about 5,000 covers about the cost of the report. So if you don't at least break even with the report, we refund your money in full.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we usually don't recommend you make a purchase unless we think you can get at least 10,000 off. So at least double your return.
Okay. So we're going to check here. Kay, is it okay to do your property? You gave me the address. She's muted.
Oh.
Sorry. Yes, you may.
All right. So we're going to click there and we're going to pretend like we're Kay. So we put their address in there and she lives at 908 Kilgore Court in Allen. So I'm going to click that. So we're crunching some numbers right here. It says, is this right?
Correct.
Kay and Edgar right? So we say yes. Okay, so we found your property in our system. It does require an email. I've got my email in there. So we're looking for evidence to appeal myself. And how did you find out about us? We're going to put a real estate agent. So I'm going to continue here. And we're just asking some questions here. Let's see, this property qualified for homestead, and I'm not going to go in and bother all those other things. So now, what is this telling me? Looks like my appraised value, I see right down here, went up a little bit. Percent change, here we go. 3% change. So that's not too bad, but let's see here. View the analysis. Okay. Okay, I've got bad news for you.
Why?
It looks like, Glenn, why don't you explain that? Are you still on? Yeah.
Yes.
Glenn,
yeah. I'm unmuted now, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we like to shoot people straight when they come to our website. You know, some people when they score, if you saw this filled in all the way to the far right, it'd be a blue color and it would say very strong. Sometimes when people score strong or very strong, they say, does every property score that when they look it up? The answer is no. Actually, most properties don't score very strong or strong. So if you scored moderate, we say moderate because that means we found one comp that can help you, but if you scroll down, there's quite a few comps that can hurt you in the appeal. And so we're just shooting you straight. We're saying that we don't think that recent sales will help you get the value lowered. And so we are really just trying to give an honest and straightforward recommendation to you at this point. You can either make a purchase at this point and kind of proceed with caution, but if you scroll back up again as well, we break down what you can expect and what we're saying your conservative and optimistic tax savings are going to be. And you can see from there that it's $0 on both optimistic and conservative. So we're pretty much saying don't make a purchase of our product. And the reason why we do that is because we really want to help manage expectations going into it. Mm-hmm. And we really want to, we don't want to just make somebody feel good in the moment that they've got a good case and then they spend a bunch of time on something and then they get rejected by the appraisal district. I don't think that does our brand very good. And I don't think that that's, you're going to be very happy, a satisfied customer with that. I think the one thing that we've got that people keep talking about is the customer service and the honest approach that we have to solving this problem for people. So if you've got a moderate, we're telling you maybe you should focus more on condition issues of your property because we're looking at just recent sales and we may not know specific things about your property like the needed foundation estimate that you have, things like that. So maybe focus more on issues like that.
So I'm looking here. I think the purple one is where her property is. This looks like, is this Twin Creeks, Kay, or where?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so looks like right here, and then we see a red dot here, a red dot here, a red dot there. That's not good. We see another red dot here, and then a green dot. So I see why it doesn't look good. So if we scroll down here to
So
recommendations.
what does the red dot mean? Houses that have sold that would be comparable?
Yeah, it's a
houses that have
comparable sale,
sold,
but it's not good news. It hurts you
yeah,
actually.
Oh, okay.
using the appraisal district system, it adjusts
Uh-huh.
higher. So that's a
Okay.
comp that they would use against you if you tried to get a
Okay.
reduction.
So
Okay.
here's the recommendation that PropertyTax.io makes. It says you qualify for the bronze. Well, no one ever wants the bronze medal, but basically what they're saying here, I won't take a bunch of time going through that, but it says, you know, we don't have really the comps to help you out with this. So we don't encourage you to make a purchase of the report. And if you did, we couldn't guarantee it. But if you think you have issues with your house, or it hadn't been updated in 20 years, or you got foundation problems, you can purchase the bronze package for $25. It allows you to upload photos. We resize the photos, put them in a nice report. You can send them in, and you know, sometimes you can get something that way. The watchdog reporter is a Glenn has gotten to know him pretty well, and this is exactly what he did the first year. He went to the site, he got this kind of feedback, said, hey, we don't have anything for you. He's a consumer reporter. He liked that because he said, hey, this is somebody not trying to sell me something, you know, when I don't need it. And so he brought the bronze package and took pictures of some scuffed up hardwoods that maybe his dog had chewed up or something like that. And lo and behold, he got a pretty decent reduction out of it. So that's, I want to show one other thing here before we leave that site here. If we scroll down to the bottom here, Glenn, where am I not seeing the chat thing? Is it on the?
I don't know why you're not seeing the chat on there. You should be. You should. We've had a lot of people chat in today, so I know it's there.
Yeah, yeah, it's at the very bottom. What is he looking for?
I'm
Glenn?
looking for the little chat window, and maybe it's just not on my screen. I'm not going to waste a bunch of time looking for it, but if you, normally it's there, and we'll figure it out if we sign off probably what happened to it. But that allows you to chat in, and when you chat in, you're going to get Glenn, or you're going to get Brian, who is the programmer, or you're going to get, sometimes you're going to get me, or maybe our admin. So you're going to get people that know the program and know what they're talking about. So
maybe it's because somebody's not logged in. Maybe you have to log in to get your chat.
No, you know, sometimes I have issues with Zoom because it's such a client intensive program that web pages don't fully load everything.
Oh, okay.
And so it might be an issue just with the screen share that we're seeing. Because I went to it right now and I see it on my site, but
I just did a refresh. Let's see if that does anything.
So we have a question.
Here we go. There it is. So let me chat in right there. Can everybody see that in the lower right-hand corner? Okay, so I'm going to chat in, and I'm going to say, I can start a conversation, or I can search for myself. Well, let's just say I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to know, I want to see about the custom. I want to see the custom report. And so here's an article that says, should I choose the gold or the silver package? The silver package, and should I choose the express or the do-it-yourself? So if we do the silver package, I can click there, and I'm going to get an article that's written by Glenn. It's just full of good stuff. So it's got a video walkthrough of the custom analysis. So all that's free. You don't have to be a customer to do that. So I always say, yeah, you could do this yourself if you know what you're doing, and most of the realtors do, but good gosh, for $75, why would you? It's just take you all day to do it. So Kay, is there anything else we haven't covered that you wanted us to?
One other question that came in. Can someone over 65 do a protest on their value?
Sure. Yeah, your taxes are going to be, so when you're over 65, your ISD and your county taxes are frozen, but that doesn't prevent you from filing a protest, and your city taxes are likely not frozen unless you live in Plano. I know Plano offers the over 65 frozen taxes. So if you're not in one of those, if you're not in Plano, then your city taxes can still go up, and the city taxes are your second highest tax rate. You know, the majority of your tax bill is going to be frozen. Like I think over 60% of your tax bill is going to be frozen, but the city taxes can still go up, and you can certainly still file a protest. So.
Okay. Well, I can't thank you all enough. I think our clients have enjoyed it because we've gone a little bit beyond our time and they could have gotten off. But it's just really great information. And I think everybody is clear about where to go to if they're needing this help. And I also can't thank our great realtors in Ebby's Plano office enough for inviting their clients and then also for our clients to attend today. So hopefully this has been of much value, and we've had great attendance, and I just want to say thank you. We're here to serve you, and we're hoping that everybody in our client base is staying safe and healthy and well, and we're looking for a bright future for us all. So Glenn, Jim, you have anything?
I don't think so. I think we'll close it off, and we did record this. So, Kay, I'll be sending you the link.
Okay.
We'll be uploading this to our YouTube channel, and you have permission to upload it. Any of the agents that want to upload it,
Okay.
have at it.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, everybody.
And you're going to send us a list of attendees. So if our agents,
I assume I can download that. Assuming I can, I will.
okay, or screenshot. I think you had sent
Okay.
some of them.
Yeah.
Thank you all. We appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.